In this lesson, you will learn how to trace, sew, and poke and press using Textile 7 sewing shortcuts. This is the Ivory Straight. You can create flat trim, gathered trim, mirrored flat trim, and mirrored gathered trim. Trace around the scallop using your fabric marker. Mark in your alignment lines so that you can move your shortcut over to create the next piece of trim. Pin your pattern piece down and place your shortcut on the edge that you choose to trim. Trace around your shortcut, placing a pin in the center point at the baseline. This will allow you to tilt the shortcut into place for the next position on the curve. This is the Ivory Corner. You'll need for this the corner and the straight shortcut. Place down your corner shortcut first and work out how much fabric you'll need. Line up your straight shortcut on either side of your corner and mark out using the alignment lines. The Ivory Inverted Corner. This shortcut creates a beautiful inverted corner in flat or gathered trim. Place your shortcut down, making sure you have enough room on either side for the straight shortcut. Trace around your inverted corner first. Use your baseline and/or alignment lines to line up the straight. Mark out using a fabric marker. The Ivory Simple Pivot Corner. This creates flat and gathered trim. You will need for this the corner and the straight. Start by laying your corner down and mark out. Use your alignment lines and/or baselines to mark out the straight on either side. The Ivory Curve Shortcuts. You can create flounce, gathered trim, and flat trim. Start by placing the curve shortcut down and place a pin at the center point of the curve. Mark in the alignment lines and trace around the scallop edge. Continue to mark out and repeat this for the entire circle. Pin your pattern piece down and place your shortcut on the edge that you choose to trim. Trace around your shortcut, placing a pin in the center point at the baseline. This will allow you to tilt the shortcut into place for the next position on the curve. The Ivory Inner Curve Shortcuts. Place the inner curve down and place a pin in the center point of your shortcut. Trace around the edge using the alignment lines to line up every single scallop. You can use the larger curve shortcut to create a boundary around the trim. The Odd One Out is for creating a one-off unique scallop. It replaces the need to perfectly calculate the width of the scallop to fit the sewing space. To create the half scallop, draw in your shortcut lines and mark in the halfway point on the Odd One Out. Then move your straight shortcut into position and draw in the lines. Extend the ivory scallop peak. Place your Odd One Out into position and mark out the halfway point. Move the Odd One Out into position and stretch it over. Mark in the lines and turn your Odd One Out around to smooth out the peak. To extend the recess point, mark out your straight shortcut and join your Odd One Out to the straight shortcut and mark out the lines. This is the sewing technique for all the ivory shortcuts in the Scallop series, demonstrated using the Ivory Straight shortcut. Set up your machine with a foot that allows you complete visibility to the stitch line. I use an open toe foot. Most machines will come with a buttonhole foot, so this could be a good option. Just make sure the foot has a large window. Make sure to have the extra slide-on table attached to the machine. For sewing tight curves, I prefer a Microtex needle, but the needle preference will depend on the fabric. Set the needle position to down if your machine has this setting. If not, use the hand dial to set the needle to down before each pivot. Set the stitch length to 2 as recommended on the shortcut. With the Ivory Straight shortcut traced out, be sure to leave a 5cm or 2-inch gap between the fabric fold and the peak of the scallop. Once you become more confident sewing scallop, this gap can become much smaller. Make sure to pin each scallop. When sewing scallop, face the peak of the scallop towards your dominant hand. In my case, my dominant hand is my right, so I face the scallop peaks towards this hand. Use your dominant hand to steer and turn the scallop, and use your other hand to guide and pass under the needle while you splay your fingers. Now watch the action come together. Notice the extra gap of fabric between the peak and the fold edge is useful for grip. Your splayed fingers act to spread and flatten the fabric, so the needle has clear, accurate stitches as it pierces the fabric surface. Follow the shortcut line as accurately as possible. When you approach the recess, be sure to pivot your needle exactly at the corner and sew 2 stitches. Then pivot again to sew up to the peak. Note the recess on the ivory trim stands above baseline and is a feature of this scallop. Once the scallop is sewn, take the odd one out and use the seam allowance guide to mark in the 2mm line from the stitches. Once you become confident at sewing scallop, you won't need this guide. You will use your eye for this distance. Ensure this is a 2mm gap, as the seam will tear through if the gap is smaller. Cut out on the seam allowance line the general scallop silhouette, but don't cut down to the recess line yet. Then carefully go back and cut down to the recess point with only one cut. The ivory has a tendency to tear through if you don't leave enough fabric for support. Iron off the fabric marker. Pop each scallop through to the correct side. Take your poke and press and start to push each scallop out to the seam edge and lightly iron. Notice the poke and press has a flat end. This is to help you manipulate the fabric more easily on the ironing board. You can make batches of trim ready to add to whatever your next sewing project might be.